At my sister's luxury hotel in Venice. The front desk froze her platinum card mid-checkout. Her voice shook through the phone. Ethan, fix this right now. Behind her, suitcases stood open, her husband's parents staring, embarrassed. She didn't know the bank had already flagged every dollar she'd stolen, 200,000 of them, using a power of attorney my mother never canceled. 3 days earlier, I was just a filmmaker wrapping a quiet indie film. Now, I was directing my own revenge. But what they didn't know was, before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Because what happened next wasn't just about money. It was about the moment I realized the people I trusted most could rewrite my life without my consent. This isn't a story about loss. It's about boundaries. I didn't always think of myself as cautious. When I was a kid, I believed family was the safest place on earth. My dad used to film everything on his old Super 8 camera, the smell of popcorn on movie nights, the scratchy sound of the reel spinning, the way dust floated in the projector light. He'd say, "Every frame is the truth, Ethan, but you've got to be brave enough to hold on to it." I thought he meant filmmaking. I didn't realize he was teaching me how to survive my own family. My sister, Becca, was the golden one. 2 years younger, born with dimples and a laugh that made adults melt. Mom, Margaret, adored her. Becca could drop a glass, and Mom would say, "She's just creative." I could bring home straight A's, and she'd hum distractedly, already fussing with Becca's hair. I remember one dinner I was maybe 10. Becca ate. Dad had cooked spaghetti. He wasn't great at it. Sauce watery. Noodles overdone. Becca wrinkled her nose. "This tastes weird." Mom immediately slid her plate to Becca and said, "You can have mine, sweetheart." I watched my father's jaw tighten as he twirled another forkful from his own plate. I swallowed mine and told him it was fine. I didn't know it back then, but that was the first time I learned what silence costs. Years passed, and the pattern stayed. At 12, I entered a short film contest at school. I shot everything: Becca playing in the yard, Mom hanging laundry, the sun flickering through the sheets. It won first place. When they called my name, Mom clapped politely, but when Becca tripped on stage to hand me the ribbon, everyone laughed and cooed. Mom took more pictures of her helping me hold the trophy than of me winning it. I smiled anyway. I always smiled. Dad died the summer I turned 17. Heart attack. Sudden. Brutal. He left behind boxes of film reels and one letter. "Keep telling the truth, even when it hurts." Mom fell apart for a few weeks, then rebuilt herself around Becca. I worked 2 part-time jobs, sent my college acceptance deposit myself, and watched as Mom used the insurance payout to pay off Becca's private school tuition. "She's still young," she'd said. "She needs stability." I guess I didn't. College was survival. I took night classes, shot weddings on weekends, edited real estate videos in dorm basements that smelled like burnt coffee. My phone background was a quote Dad once scribbled on a script margin: "Nobody will save you, so learn to save yourself." Becca majored in marketing, dropped out after a year, said college didn't vibe with her energy. By then, Mom had moved to a smaller house. The garage smelled like damp wood and lemon cleaner. Every time I visited, Becca was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through travel blogs on Mom's iPad, saying things like, "Manifesting my best life." When I landed my first steady film job, assistant director on a toothpaste commercial, I called Mom to tell her. She said, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Becca might start an influencer account?" I laughed, but something in me cracked a little. Then came the bailouts. First, Becca's apartment deposit, when her roommate bailed last minute. I wired the money before thinking. Then a dentist bill, a lost wallet, a car repair. Each time came with a text. "Just this once. You're amazing. I'll pay you back." Mom reinforced it. "She's not built like you, Ethan. You recover fast." Translation: you can take the hit. When my first feature film premiered, I was 30. It was a tiny indie shot on borrowed gear. Half my crew paid in pizza. We got into Sundance. I called Mom in tears. She said she was proud, then added, "Becca can't make it. She's at a wellness retreat." Becca texted a heart emoji and, at the end of a long voice note about her yoga schedule, asked if I could cover her rent just for 2 weeks. I did. Of course I did. I didn't know it then. But Becca's pattern wasn't just need, it was entitlement dressed as charm. 2 years later, when my father's old Super 8 reels started degrading, Mom asked if I could digitize them. I drove over, the smell of cinnamon pie filling the kitchen, and found Becca at the table, scrolling through her phone, laughing at something. "You're late again," she said. I checked my watch. I was 15 minutes early. "I'm on time." She smirked. "Director's time is optional, right? Ryan," her fiancé then, chuckled like it was an inside joke. That night burned into my memory. The TV was showing a travel documentary about Lake Como. Becca's bracelets clicked as she reached for the salad. "You'll be glad to know we've figured out your role," she said casually. "You direct, we live. You invest in futures like ours. And you get to feel useful. Win-win." Ryan laughed. "He's the structure. We're the story." Mom looked uneasy but didn't stop them. "Don't start," she murmured at me. "Not them." I remember placing my fork down gently, folding the napkin. "Okay," I said. The sound of the TV filled the silence. Someone on screen dove into blue water. Somewhere inside me, something snapped quiet. Months passed. I focused on work. Late nights, color grading sessions, call sheets taped on walls. My life was a mosaic of small deadlines. Becca's life was filtered sunsets and sponsored smoothies. I barely noticed when Mom asked for my signature on a temporary document so she could handle some property tax paperwork while I was in Vancouver for a shoot. "Just in case," she said. I signed it over coffee, never thinking twice. I didn't know that signature would come back to haunt me. Flash forward. January this year. I sold a script, finally a deal that made me sit down when the notification hit. I had enough to pay my crew bonuses, make a down payment on a small house near the studio, and, for the first time, breathe. Mom said, "Finally, you're really making it." I should have known that was foreshadowing. 2 weeks later, Becca invited everyone for dinner. "Big roast," she said. "Celebration of new chapters." Her apartment smelled like rosemary and candles labeled old money. Ryan poured wine, raised his glass. "To family ventures." My chest tightened. During dinner, Becca set her phone face down like she was about to make an announcement. "We're going to Europe," she said. "Italy, France, Spain, the works." Mom clapped her hands. "How lovely," Becca added, "with Ryan's parents. It's life-changing. Before we try for a baby." I nodded. Polite. "Sounds amazing." Then Becca said, "We're just a little tight." There it was. The request dressed as vulnerability. Ryan sighed. "Flights are crazy." Mom jumped in. "Your sister deserves something nice, Ethan. You never even use your vacation days." A text buzzed in my pocket. A production update. Then a PayPal request from Becca. "Deposit." "How tight?" I asked. "Not tight," Becca said too quickly. "Just 200. 200,000. The room tilted. Mom said sharply, "Don't be cruel." Becca smiled. "You can. You always can. It's your role." I stood up. "I can't. And I won't." Becca's face hardened. "Wow. Money changed you." I left before I said something I'd regret. Driving home, the streetlights blurred. My hands shook on the steering wheel. But a small part of me felt relief finally saying no. I didn't know it back then, but saying no was the most dangerous thing I'd ever do. 3 nights later, I opened my banking app. 2 transfers out, travel and family support. My stomach dropped. The amount matched exactly. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then I saw the note. Linked device authorization. Margaret M. Mom's name. I scrolled further. A PDF labeled "Help Rebecca. Mom. Power of attorney form." My old signature. My own trust weaponized against me. I called her. She answered with a sigh. "Don't you raise your voice at me." "Where's Becca?" "She's packing," Mom said. "There are flights in the morning." "You used my form." "It's family," she said softly. "It's theft," I said. Silence. Then, "You'll get it back. Don't be dramatic." That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at Dad's Super 8 reel on my shelf. In the flicker of the projector light, I swear I heard his voice again. "Every frame is the truth." And I realized if I didn't hold on to the truth this time, no one else would. The next morning, sunlight cut through my blinds like it had something to prove. I sat on the edge of the bed, coffee untouched, my phone lighting up every few minutes, missed calls from Mom. One text from Becca. "We'll pay you back when we're back. Promise." The words felt like a rerun of every lie before it. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the bank portal, and started documenting everything. Screenshots of the transactions, the timestamps, the note authorized user added. Rebecca M. I created a folder labeled fraud, evidence. It felt clinical, detached, but my hands were shaking the entire time. By noon, Mom was outside my apartment. She didn't even knock, just let herself in like it was still her house. You're overreacting, she said, dropping her purse on my counter. Her perfume filled the room, sharp, sweet, suffocating. $200,000, I said flatly. It's temporary. It's theft. It's family. The repetition was almost poetic in its absurdity. I stared at her, wondering how long she'd been rehearsing that line. She sighed, crossing her arms. Becca didn't mean harm. You're successful. You'll make it back. That's not the point. Her eyes narrowed. You've always been so cold, Ethan. Money doesn't buy love. No, I said quietly, but it does pay the mortgage. She looked around my apartment, scanning the call sheets pinned to my wall. The cables coiled neatly by my desk. The order I built out of chaos. Your father would be ashamed you're treating your sister like this. My father believed in accountability, I said. That's why his films meant something. For a moment, something flickered across her face, guilt. Maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. They're already in Italy, she said, tone clipped. Don't embarrass them. We'll fix it when they're back. When she left, the door shut too softly. It was worse than a slam. That night, I sat in the editing bay, reviewing footage from my film. A scene played where an actor pleaded for forgiveness after betrayal. His eyes looked real, raw. My stomach twisted. I knew that kind of pain. Ava, my producer, slid in beside me, holding a paper cup of coffee. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't. She hesitated. Is this about your family? I didn't answer. She just nodded. You can tell, huh? She smiled sadly. I've seen that look before. It's the look of someone realizing blood doesn't mean loyalty. I wanted to deny it, but the truth was already carved too deep. Later that week, I got an email from my bank's fraud department. They confirmed what I already knew. The transactions were legitimate under the old POA power of attorney still active. The word still active hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just money they had access. I called my lawyer, Daniel Harris. He'd been a classmate back in film school before switching careers. Send me everything, he said. His voice was calm but serious. And Ethan, don't contact them again. Let me handle it. He explained the steps. Freeze accounts. Revoke POA. Report to the bank's fraud unit. Notify authorities if needed. The language was sterile, almost comforting in its structure. But beneath every legal term, I heard one truth. My own mother had signed off on it. That night, as I typed up the fraud affidavit, a notification pinged an Instagram story from Becca. She was poolside at a resort, sunglasses on, a cocktail in hand. Caption: Manifesting abundance. I stared at it for a long time before closing the app. By morning, the family group chat exploded. Aunt Linda. Ethan, what are you doing freezing their cards? They're stranded. Cousin Jenna. This isn't how you treat blood. And my mother. I raised you better than this. I muted the thread. The silence that followed felt cleaner than any apology could. But peace never lasts in my family. At 2 a.m., my phone rang, unknown number, Italian country code. I didn't pick up. It rang again, then again. Finally, a FaceTime request from Becca. I answered on audio only. Ethan, she hissed, voice shaky. Stop whatever you did. The hotel says the payment reversed. We're humiliated. Good. Don't do this. Ryan's parents are watching. Maybe they'll finally see what I've been dealing with. She gasped. You called the bank? I filed a report. That's insane. You'll ruin us. I didn't ruin you. Becca, you did that yourself. Ryan's voice cut in faintly behind her. Tell him we'll pay him back. Shut up, Ryan. She snapped, then lowered her tone. Ethan, please. We're family. No, I said. We're proof that family can be the first to rob you blind. She hung up. I sat there in the dark, the glow of my phone screen fading, the silence in my apartment stretching thin. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just opened my notebook and wrote one sentence. I am not your ATM. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. The next morning, the air in Los Angeles felt heavy, like it knew something was unraveling. I walked into the studio early, hours before the crew. The set smelled of paint, sawdust, and stale coffee, comforting in its own industrial way. It was the only space I could still control. Daniel called around 9. "I've drafted the revocation," he said. "We'll have the POA voided today. You'll need to sign it in person." "Done," I said. He hesitated. "And Ethan, once this is public, it won't stay private. They'll push back hard, especially your mother." I'd already accepted that. The real loss wasn't money. It was the illusion that we were ever on the same team. At lunch, Ava brought me a sandwich I didn't ask for. "You've got that look again," she said softly. "What look?" "The one right before someone says, 'I'm fine,' and then burns their life down." I almost smiled. "I'm not burning it down," I said. "I'm just cleaning it." That night, I got a voicemail from Mom. Her voice swung between anger and pity like a pendulum. "How could you do this to your sister? She's in a foreign country, Ethan. You humiliated her." She said the hotel called security. I deleted it halfway through, but her words clung to me like smoke. Later, an email from Ryan landed in my inbox. Subject line: "We need to talk." The tone was slick, rehearsed. "Ethan, buddy, there's been a misunderstanding. The money was a family loan. Becca's father-in-law has friends in finance. We can fix this quietly if you just lift the freeze." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. "Buddy," that word always came before manipulation. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to Daniel. He wrote back one line: "Do not engage. Everything in writing from now on." By midweek, the group chat had transformed into a public courtroom. Becca's friends posted vague quotes about toxic siblings and money over love. Distant relatives chimed in with sermons about forgiveness. My phone buzzed nonstop. I muted every thread. Then came the second twist. Daniel called again, his tone colder. "Ethan, I pulled the authorization records. Your mother didn't just leave the POA active, she used it to verify Becca's transfer. She was the one who approved it." For a moment, the room tilted. I leaned against my desk, the wood edge digging into my palms. "She what?" "She confirmed the transfer to the bank as co-authorizer. That's why they didn't flag it as fraud initially." I closed my eyes. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "It's family. Don't be dramatic." That night, I drove to her house. The porch light was on, the same yellow bulb that had hummed since my teenage years. She opened the door wearing her robe, the scent of lavender and guilt hanging in the air. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "You used my name," I said quietly. "I did what I had to do for this family." "For Becca, you mean? She needed help. So you stole from me." She flinched. "Watch your tone." "Or what?" I asked, voice calm. "You'll take something else that's mine?" She looked smaller then, brittle. "Your father would have understood." "No," I said. "He would have filmed this and called it a tragedy." Her eyes filled, but I didn't stay to watch her cry. I left the house and didn't look back. Over the next few days, the situation escalated faster than I could track. Ryan's father called Daniel, dropping names, implying lawsuits. Daniel recorded it and sent me the file. "Classic intimidation tactic," he said. "But don't worry, we've got leverage now." Meanwhile, on set, my DP Greg handed me a coffee one morning and said, "For whatever they took." He didn't mean the money. I felt the lump in my throat tighten. By Friday, the studio buzzed with final cuts. My crew bonuses were due. I logged into release payments and paused. The amount remaining was enough. Barely. I hit send. It felt symbolic, choosing loyalty to people who actually earned it. That evening, another message from Becca. This time, no emojis. "We're home. Can you call me? Please." I didn't. Instead, I opened the footage from my dad's reels, the flicker of sunlight over their old backyard. His voice faintly audible, telling me to keep it real. The tape had warped over time, but one frame stayed clear, him holding the camera toward me, smiling like he already knew I'd spend my life recording truths no one wanted to face. I leaned back, eyes burning, and whispered to the empty room, "I'm keeping it real, Dad." A minute later, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from Mom. "You're tearing this family apart." I typed a single reply and didn't hesitate. "No, I'm just refusing to keep pretending it isn't already broken." And then I powered off my phone. Outside, the sky dimmed from gold to gray. Somewhere in the city, my sister was probably crying for sympathy on Instagram. Somewhere else, my mother was crafting another version of the story where she was the victim. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't part of their script. I had my own to write now. The call came 3 days later, right in the middle of a night shoot. We were filming a scene where an actor confronted his brother for betraying him. The soundstage was cold, lights harsh white, cameras humming like insects. I just cued action when my phone buzzed in my pocket, an international number again. For a second, I almost ignored it, but something in my gut said, "Pick up." I stepped away from the set, the echo of dialogue still ringing behind me. "Ethan?" It was Becca, her voice trembling. "You need to fix this, right now." I closed my eyes. "What's wrong?" "The cards declined. The hotel says the payment reversed. The flights home, everything's locked. We're stuck in Venice like idiots." "Then you're finally in a setting worthy of your posts," I said quietly. "Don't do this," she snapped. "Mom said you'd be reasonable. Mom also said you'd pay me back 2 years ago. Remind me how that went." I could hear chaos behind her muffled voices, luggage wheels dragging, someone cursing in Italian. "Please," she said. "Ryan's parents are in the lobby. They're mortified." "Good. Maybe they'll stop investing in their son's startup that doesn't exist." "Ethan," she hissed, panic rising. "Do you even hear yourself? You froze everything." "No, Becca," I said, keeping my tone calm. "I froze me. I stopped being your emergency fund." There was a long silence, only the static crackle of her breath. Then Ryan's voice came through faintly. "Put him on speaker." "Don't," I said, but she did. Ryan's voice turned smooth, practiced. "Hey, man, look, clearly this is just a misunderstanding. We can sort it out when we refinance." I laughed once, the sound dry. "When you refinance what, Ryan? Your ego?" "Careful," he said, his voice sharpening. "You're making a scene. I'm not the one stranded in Italy." Then, quieter, Becca said, "What about the baby, Ethan? We told you we were trying. This stress isn't good for me." I froze. "The baby?" She hesitated, just long enough to tell me it was a lie. "That's low, even for you," I said. Her breath hitched. "Wow, you really are heartless." "No," I said softly. "I'm just done being fooled." I hung up. For a full minute, I stood there staring at the dark screen. Around me, the set hummed back to life, lights shifting, crew voices blending into a steady rhythm. Greg, my DP, called out, "You good, boss?" "Yeah," I said. From the top, the actor on set raised his voice, raw and furious. "You used me. You took everything and smiled while doing it." His hands shook, his eyes wet. Watching it, I felt something twist in my chest. Because for the first time, I wasn't directing fiction anymore. By morning, the story had hit the family grapevine. A cousin texted, "Did you really call the cops on your sister?" I didn't respond. Daniel had already filed the fraud report and begun drafting the repayment contract. His email subject line read, "Collateral clause enforced." When I walked into the bank that afternoon, the glass doors reflected a version of me I barely recognized, calm, deliberate, dangerous in my silence. The banker said, "We've locked all joint authorizations. Your assets are secure." Good, I thought. Finally. That night, I came home to 8 new voicemails from Mom. The first 3 were fury, the next 3 bargaining, the last 2 tears. "You're tearing this family apart." I replayed the final message twice. Her voice cracked on the word, family, and something cold inside me answered, "You already did that years ago." I didn't delete them. I saved everyone. 2 days later, Daniel emailed again. "We've got confirmation. They signed the repayment plan. Monthly transfers. Interest. Collateral listed. If they default once, it all escalates." "Good," I replied. "Send it." That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, watching the city lights flicker through half-drawn blinds. The air smelled faintly of rain and dust. On my coffee table lay a printout of the repayment schedule. Neat columns of numbers, each one a reminder that accountability could exist even without forgiveness. Then my phone vibrated. FaceTime again. "Becca." I stared at her name glowing on the screen before answering. This time with video. She looked different. Mascara smudged, hair pulled back, eyes swollen. The marble backdrop of luxury gone. "We signed," she whispered. "I know. Can we talk?" "We are." Her lips trembled. I messed up. Yes. I thought you'd understand. You've always saved us. Exactly. Her breath hitched. You hate me. No. I said, voice even. Hate takes energy. I just stopped volunteering mine. For a second, she looked like the little girl from Dad's films. The one who used to twirl in the yard, oblivious to who was holding the camera. Mom said you won't press charges, she murmured. I won't for now. But one missed payment, Becca. And this story gets a sequel. Her eyes widened. You're serious. I've never been clearer. Behind her, Ryan's voice called faintly. Ask him if he'll unfreeze the grocery card. Becca's lips parted, hopeful. Just for a few weeks? I shook my head. No, her face hardened again. Familiar as an old wound. You'll regret this. Mom will never forgive you. I gave a faint smile. Then I guess we're finally being honest. I ended the call. The apartment went silent except for the hum of the fridge. I sat there for a while, the tension slowly leaving my body like steam after a storm. On instinct, I opened one of Dad's reels again, the one where he'd accidentally filmed his own reflection in a window. His voice played faint and distant. Truth hurts, but lies rot. I let the reel spin until it clicked empty. Then I stood, grabbed my jacket, and walked back to set. Ava looked up from her monitor when I entered. Everything okay? Yeah, I said. We're ready for the next shot. What's it called? She asked. I glanced at the scene list taped to the wall. Scene 47. I said. Redemption. She smiled. Rolling. As the camera started, I whispered to myself, every frame is the truth. And this time, the truth finally belonged to me. 2 weeks later, the first wire transfer hit my account, $4,000 labeled repayment 1. It wasn't much, not compared to what they took, but it was real. Proof that the story wasn't over, just rewritten. Daniel called that afternoon. They've signed everything, he said. You've got teeth in this contract. Miss one payment, and we activate the clause. Good, I said. Keep it loaded. He laughed softly. You always did prefer your revenge clean. I moved into the new house a week later. Nothing fancy, just white walls, a crooked hallway, a backyard barely big enough for a chair and a lemon tree. But it was mine. I unpacked slow, one box at a time, letting the quiet fill in the spaces where noise used to live. The first thing I hung was Dad's Super 8 reel, framed like art. When the afternoon sun hit it, the celluloid glowed amber. It looked almost alive. That night, I printed one rule in bold black letters and taped it to the fridge. I am not your ATM. Simple, blunt, true. Mom texted once. You could have handled this privately. I replied, I did. You made it public. She never answered. Becca's messages now are short, logistical. A photo of a grocery list with budget scribbled on it. A screenshot of a payment receipt. No apologies. No hearts. Just transactions, the purest language we've ever shared. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if she'll ever finish paying. If the guilt will hit her in some quiet hotel room the way my anger hit me that night. Maybe, maybe not. Daniel wants me to consider a script based on all this. It's cinematic, he said. You already wrote half of it in your emails. Maybe I will. After all, I've spent my life directing other people's stories. Maybe it's time I direct my own. They thought they drained me dry, but what they really did was fund my next film. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Because sometimes the people closest to you teach you the hardest lessons. I thought losing $200,000 was the worst thing that could happen to me, but it wasn't. The real loss was believing that love means endless forgiveness. It doesn't. Love has boundaries. Respect has a cost. And sometimes, the only way to protect your peace is to walk away and let the silence speak for you. This story isn't over. Not even close.